greatest drama, the memorable story of the great among us, written by you, the people.
This chapter, Speedway Star, the story of Wilbur Shaw, one of the greatest of American racing car drivers. Wilbur Shaw, in appearance a typical executive, but on his desk a trophy that marked him apart from other men.
That is one of my prized possessions. It's a pure silver brick that weighs about 58 pounds, and it's been won by some pretty hot potatoes. I'm really very fond of and quite proud of this old historical trophy.
That trophy brought back memories of the Indianapolis Speedway and the Memorial Day race of 1940. Wilbur Shaw had won the annual Speed Classic the year previous. If he could win this time, make it 2 consecutive victories, the trophy would be his forever. The feat seemed almost impossible. So many other fine drivers had attempted it and failed. But for once, fate was kind. After 500 hard-fought miles, Shaw drove his car into the winner's pit. There, he received a kiss from his wife and the silver trophy. The First World War marked the start of Shaw's racing career. He tried to enlist in the Army. Turned down because of his youth, he quit high school and looked for a job that promised excitement. The answer, automobile racing. Speed King Barney Oldfield was Shaw's boyhood hero. Other boyhood idols were dashing Ralph De Palma and Tommy Milton. The kid followed their racing exploits eagerly. Deciding to pattern his career on theirs, young Shaw found work in shops that built racing cars. His ambition to drive his own racer. Meanwhile, he learned all there was to know about engines. By 1922, when he was 20 years old, Shaw was a full-fledged speed demon. He began racing on the treacherous dirt tracks where death rode on every turn of the wheels. A hard, dangerous school for drivers. Crashes? Sure, plenty of them. But they were part of the price to be paid for the glory. On the dirt tracks, Shaw served his racing apprenticeship, preparing for the big one, the annual Memorial Day race at Indianapolis. Finally, you made the grade, entering the Indianapolis race of 1927. The pageantry of the big show. This was a far cry from dirt track racing. This was the big time, but were you good enough to compete with the stars? When the pressure was on and the chips were down, could you hold your own with the Speed Kings? The Indianapolis test was 500 miles on an almost rectangular track, with 4 murderous turns and short straightaways. Its brick surface was slick with grease and oil. Those bricks had been soaked often by the blood of youngsters like yourself, ambitious kids who gambled for the big stakes and lost. 500 miles, lap after lap, a savage test of cars and men. You didn't win that race, but you did finish 4th and took your place among the stars of the Speedway. 2 years later, you married Catalyn Stern, a pretty girl from Indiana. Marriage brought happiness, but not victory at Indianapolis. In 1931, you crashed. In 1932, your car broke down. In 1933, with victory in sight, an oil leak. In 1935, rain held you back. Now it was Indianapolis race day, 1937. By now, you had earned enough prize money in other races to build your own car. She was fast, but rubbery on the turns. Friends warned you that the car was a man killer. But you started with a pack. Too late to drop out now, even if you wanted to. Your fate was in the hands of the racing gods. down the straightaway and a churning inferno of speeding steel into that first jolting turn. Your friends had been right. The car was a demon to handle. But she was also a demon for speed. And to you, that was the only thing that mattered. Grimly, you held on, took a terrible physical beating, and came in a winner. Victory at Indianapolis, the American Racing Championship. After 10 long years, you had achieved the great goal. Indianapolis, 1941. 4 years had passed. Wilbur Shaw was gunning for his 4th Speedway triumph. Misfortune dogged him from the start. A fire broke out in the garages, but the cars were rescued. As the race began, it seemed that Wilbur Shaw would beat the jinx that had blocked even the greatest of the great from capturing 3 consecutive Indianapolis victories. Shaw took the lead. 150,000 spectators watched tensely as he held it hour after hour. Victory was in sight when fate turned thumbs down. A wheel broke. Disaster. Wilbur Shaw had dared the fickle gods of the Speedway once too often. He had run out his string of luck. 3 vertebrae crushed. The doctors did a good patch-up job, but Shaw would never race again. Recovering, he worked for a manufacturer of airplane tires. For Shaw, it was a natural development. He had learned about tires the hard way on the track. He did a good job of designing and selling tires, although his heart wasn't in it. Somehow, he had to get back to the Indianapolis Speedway. In 1946, he went back to Indianapolis, but not as a driver. Those days were past forever. Shaw had become president of the track. If he could no longer take part in the thrills of racing, at least he could be general manager of the great spectacle. His home was a fine new house in the suburbs of Indianapolis. For the first time, he and his wife could lead the life of ordinary folk. He could enjoy the simple pleasures, the companionship of his son, without the old worry about sudden death. No more trophies. Leaving home, he could look forward with reasonable certainty to a safe return. And he had to leave often. As president of the Speedway, it was part of his job to travel around the country, keeping the public informed about racing. You'd find him in Akron at soapbox derby time with boxer Jack Dempsey and actor Jimmy Stewart. For a day, they would all be kids again, Stewart and Dempsey competing in soapbox cars. Then to the serious business of the day, refereeing the soapbox races. Watching the kids at work on their speed wagons, polishing the cars, oiling the wheels, Wilbur Shaw was reminded of himself as a child. He, too, had won his first race with a soapbox car. From these kids might come the racing giants of tomorrow. Seeing himself in each young racer, Shaw's congratulations to the winners were deeply felt. The Indianapolis Speedway was a rundown operation when you took it over. Rebuilding swiftly, you restored the track to its former eminence. The only major difficulty took place in 1947 when the drivers held out for an excessive increase in the prize money. For a while, it seemed that the great annual race might have to be canceled. But the 1947 race took place as scheduled. A former driver yourself, you could understand the feelings of the men who risked their lives to make the race a success. You assured them that the Speedway would always pay as much prize money as it could afford. Offered a record-breaking purse of $137,000, the drivers ended their holdout and went to the starting line. You had met and overcome your severest crisis as a business executive. The race was on. 500 grueling miles, lap after roaring lap at speeds better than 150 miles an hour. Disaster waiting on every turn. for the spectators, and for the drivers a grim, heartbreaking struggle against each other and against death. Auto racing at its dangerous best, with its lure of overnight wealth and its disappointments. Indianapolis with its glory and tragedy. Deploring the tragedies, Wilbur Shaw could see beyond them. The big race he knew was a laboratory in which the latest improvements in passenger cars were born and developed. The winning drivers usually drove the best automobile. As an automobile expert, Shaw had tested cars for the automobile manufacturers, cars incorporating the improvements born on the Speedway.
Racing has contributed a great deal to the modern passenger car. High compression engines, 4-speed lubrication, tires, spark plugs, almost everything that is used in the present-day motor car has been developed or improved here in competition on the Speedway. And we're quite proud of that, our contribution, believe me.
He could be proud of his own record. Champion driver and executive Wilbur Shaw, Speedway Star.
Be with us again next week at this time, when the greatest drama, true film biographies of the great among us, again comes your way.